Hi, this is Mr. Evans. This video looks at a question on emergent strategies. The question is, discuss the extent to which emergent strategies are always more effective than planned strategies. The idea of this is it's a twist on the all businesses question. Instead of all businesses, I've got the word always here. It essentially means the same thing, but hopefully this video will help you revise emergent and planned strategies and think about potential ways of answering the all businesses question at the end of paper 3. This isn't really a realistic scenario for paper 3, of course, because you'll have the case study in the paper 3 with you. The best structure for answering that paper 3 question is to think about the evidence that you've got in the case study and then contrast that with why that might not apply in all businesses. But anyway, I hope this video is helpful nevertheless. As usual, I've planned my answer before I got started, but I'm just going to jump straight into answering this question. So I have decided to start this essay with a definition to make it clear that I understand the difference between emergent and planned strategies. I don't always start with a definition, but I want the examiner to be really confident that I understand what emergent and planned strategies are. So planned strategies tend to be articulated in an organisation's strategic plan, is communicated to stakeholders and should help the organisation achieve its mission statement. The emergent strategy is what actually occurs as the planned strategy is implemented and adjusted in response to changes in the internal and external environment. Okay, so that's just a very brief introduction that explains to the examiner that I understand the difference between planned and emergent strategies, which is what this question is about. Emergent strategies are important for all businesses. Okay, so I'm kind of echoing the question here. Are emergent strategies always more effective than planned ones? Well, I'm saying that they're important for all businesses. I haven't actually used the word effective. This is because it is a strategy that is actually enacted once the planned strategy has been formulated, clearly communicated and put into action. Because many businesses will face unforeseen circumstances and changes in the internal and external environment, it may become clear that the planned strategy is not actually workable or may quickly become unrealistic to implement. Two actuallys there, which isn't great. This may be the case in a situation where a small business loses a key employee who is essential in the implementation of the strategy, or a new competitor enters the market. So I've tried to get a little bit of context in here. When a small business loses a key employee, that's far more important to a small business than a big business. And often in small businesses, you'll be reliant on the skill of a particular person to implement the strategy. So this is kind of trying to get a bit of context in here. Small businesses versus large businesses, and why in a small business, if you lose a key employee, that could really damage a planned strategy. In these situations, a business will need to change their planned strategy to achieve their mission or aim, as it is no longer workable in reality. I'm meant to say this as the planned strategy is no longer workable in reality. Doing so is a sign of flexibility in an organisation, as it shows the organisation is able to respond quickly and effectively to a changing environment. Okay, so that might be a bit better if I'd have said something along the lines of why emergent strategies are better than planned strategies just at the end of this sentence here. It would have been better if I'd have linked back to the question. I did do this in timed conditions, and this took me 20 minutes to write, including writing my plan. Emergent strategies are essential for organisations in fast-moving external environments, such as the computer game industry or online retail. So again, just trying to get a bit of context in here so that I'm answering the question in terms of all businesses, or in this case, always more effective. They will also be important in the context of fast-growing businesses, so again a bit of context, who will be dealing with the challenges involved in growing quickly whilst retaining the organisation's corporate culture and USP. Businesses in these situations who do not have contingency plans or the ability to quickly adapt will soon suffer from strategic drift when the planned strategy is no longer suitable given the changing nature of the environment. Many retailers in the UK have suffered from strategic drift and have not been able to implement an emergent strategy to deal with the fast-moving environment. For example, Toys R Us had a strategy of large warehouses in industrial parks and a limited online presence. They failed to adapt their strategy to deal with the growth in online shopping and the move to out-of-town shopping centres, and as a result, their planned strategy ultimately led to the failure of the business. Okay, so again, maybe my essay hasn't been particularly great in linking back to the question. I should have said something at the end, maybe along the lines of, if Toys R Us had implemented adjusted their planned strategy, then they may not have gone out of business, something like that, to really be focused on answering the question, are emergent strategies always more effective than planned strategies? Okay, so I've done 2 paragraphs here about why emergent strategies are more important than planned strategies. One of them is about how changes in the internal and external environment, and in this one I've really looked at at strategic drift when the planned strategy is no longer suitable given the changing nature of the business's environment. So they're quite similar in a way, but hopefully I've been able to include some context in both of those paragraphs, which show the examiner that I really understand the difference between planned and emergent strategies and why emergent strategies might be more effective than planned ones. So now I need to show the examiner some balance and why the emergent strategy wouldn't always be more effective than the planned strategy. So, however, the emergent strategy may not always be more effective than the planned strategy. So this is a bit better from me here, better exam technique, where I'm clearly showing the examiner that I'm focused on answering the question. In large and bureaucratic organisations, the structure of the organisation is usually quite mechanistic and is not designed for rapid changes in the planned strategy. So again, I'm using some context here, large and bureaucratic organisations. The organisation is designed to implement the planned strategy. In this case, a significant departure from the planned strategy to an emergent one may be difficult to communicate and implement due to the diseconomies of scale that a large business might face. So I'm saying that in a large and bureaucratic organisation, probably quite hierarchical, it can be difficult for managers to communicate accurately the emergent strategy that needs to be enacted. In such organisations, the planned strategy is usually formalised and well communicated, so employees may not understand the reason that they should change to an emergent strategy if the management team are unable to communicate the new strategy or the reasons for changing. Cotter and Schlesinger identify employees having a different assessment of the situation to management or their own self-interest at heart as possible reasons why an emergent strategy may be resisted and could ultimately be less successful than a planned one. So this is probably the best analytical paragraph in the whole organisation. It's clearly focused on large and bureaucratic organisations. We start off by echoing the words in the question, and I end up by linking clearly back to the question, and I've brought in Cotter and Schlesinger's change model to help me analyse why an emergent strategy might not be as successful as the planned one. So I've got a conclusion, of course, because I need to come to a judgment in these evaluation questions. In conclusion, emergent strategies are often more effective than planned strategies because they are able to take into account the unforeseen circumstances that develop due to changes in the internal and external environment. So hopefully this is a very clear answer to the question. Emergent strategies are often more effective than planned strategies, and I've given some support why. So I've hopefully answered the question. Okay, they're not always, but they are often more effective than planned strategies. However, so I've got some balance here in my answer, and the however is a signal to the examiner that I'm about to include some balance in my judgment. However, emergent strategies that are misunderstood or not well communicated to staff will be unlikely to achieve their goals and will therefore be less effective than the planned strategy. Okay, so how could we solve that problem? What's the solution to that? And the examiner, is able to credit you for solutions if you've included a solution to a problem in your conclusion. Therefore, it is important that managers identify possible reasons that change will be resisted and take action to prevent these from occurring. This may include educating staff on the reasons change is needed and supporting staff through the change process. So these are both suggested by Cotter and Schlesinger as ways to reduce resistance to change. So probably not the best essay I've ever written, particularly these two paragraphs. They're quite similar maybe, but you could write better paragraphs than these if you clearly linked back to the question. Nevertheless, I would imagine the essay would get top band because I've given some different business scenarios. I am clearly focused on emergent and planned strategy throughout the essay. And so that should tick most of the boxes for that top band answer that you want to put in at the end of paper 3.